Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I'd never seen anyone quite like Karen. I'd heard stories about her. Sure, everyone in town had. She was known for causing a scene over the smallest things, demanding to speak to the manager anytime something didn't go exactly her way. So, when Karen announced her campaign for mayor, I thought it was a joke. I figured no one would take her seriously. But I quickly realized she was dead serious, and this campaign was about to be more dramatic than anyone could have imagined. I still remember that first day she launched her campaign. Most candidates would have set up a table at a community fair, maybe shaken a few hands, handed out some flyers. But not Karen. She chose to set up right outside City Hall, blasting her opinions through a portable microphone that screeched every few seconds, making everyone within earshot jump. People stopped to see what was going on, and she took that as a sign they were interested. "I'm running for mayor because I'm tired of this city being run by people who don't care about us," she shouted, her voice echoing down the street. She went on about the corruption of the current administration, how they were failing the community, and how only she, Karen, could fix it. I couldn't look away. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. The crowd around her was a mix of intrigued, horrified, and mildly amused. I noticed a few people laughing under their breath, but Karen, oblivious to everything, just barreled on. I figured this was just her dramatic opening. But oh, was I wrong. This was just the beginning. From the start, her campaign was something to behold. It didn't take her long to show just how far she was willing to go. First, she assembled a group of supporters. I knew most of them, people who were unhappy with something or other in the city, people who'd had parking tickets or arguments with their neighbors and felt the city was somehow against them. Karen swooped in, promising change, but it was clear she had her own ideas of change. Her team started showing up outside polling places, intimidating anyone who looked like they weren't about to vote for her. I heard stories of her people cornering residents, saying things like, "Karen's the one who'll clean up this city. You know that, right?" And then giving them that look, as if to say there'd be consequences if they didn't agree. It didn't stop there. I ran a small bakery downtown, and one day Karen herself walked in, all smiles. She acted like she was there to support my business, but then she dropped her offer. If I endorsed her publicly, she said, she'd make sure my taxes stayed low when she won. The implication was clear. Support her, or I'd be on her bad side. I could barely hide my disgust and told her, politely, that I'd think about it. She left with a wave, smiling like she'd already secured my loyalty. I wasn't the only one she approached, either. Other local business owners told me similar stories. Karen showing up out of nowhere, slipping in promises and hints about what might happen if they didn't get on board. She was so blatant about it, I couldn't believe she thought no one would notice. But then, Karen never really believed rules applied to her. Things went from shady to downright ridiculous when she took her campaign online. She set up a series of fake profiles, spreading rumors about her opponents, accusing them of everything from bribery to embezzlement to conspiring with developers. At first, I thought no one would take her seriously, but her posts started circulating. People began talking, wondering if any of it was true. I couldn't believe it. It was like a soap opera, except we were all living in it. And then came the debate. I was almost too embarrassed to watch, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a packed hall, and Karen strutted to her podium like she already owned the place. As the other candidates laid out their plans, she stood there, arms crossed, barely listening. When it was her turn to speak, she launched straight into her accusations. "You're all in cahoots with the developers," she practically yelled, waving her arms for emphasis. The other candidates tried to keep things civil, but Karen was having none of it. She pointed her finger at one guy, claiming she had proof he was involved in some shady deal. Then she held up a crumpled piece of paper, her so-called evidence. I could see from where I was sitting that it was just some scribbles and nonsense. Nothing that would prove anything. The audience fell silent, some people glancing around, unsure if they should laugh or take her seriously. One of the other candidates tried to steer the debate back to actual issues, but Karen cut him off mid-sentence. "Don't try to distract from the real problems," she snapped, her voice echoing through the hall. This city's been run by crooks for too long, and I'm the only one brave enough to call it out. By this point, half the audience was either stifling laughter or exchanging nervous glances. The other candidates just stared at her, probably wondering if she'd finally lost it. After the debate, her antics were all anyone could talk about. Clips of her accusations went viral, and people were sharing them with captions like, "Only in our town." But Karen didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. She went on like she'd won some kind of victory, holding rallies and shouting about how she was being attacked by the media and the establishment. She framed herself as a martyr, claiming she was the only one with the guts to stand up for the people, and that the backlash was proof she was right. Then things took a turn when an investigative journalist decided to dig into her campaign tactics. The fallout was swift and brutal. First, business owners came forward, reluctantly admitting that she'd threatened them, with one guy even sharing a recording of her not-so-subtle hints. I can still hear her voice in that recording, her words dripping with false cheer. "I'd hate to see what happens if this place falls out of favor. But hey, that's just me." And if that wasn't enough, footage surfaced of her supporters harassing voters. I watched one clip in disbelief, a video of one of her campaigners blocking a voter's path, muttering something about consequences if they didn't support Karen. It was like something out of a bad mob movie, and it was hard to believe it was real. But there it was, right on the screen. By now, the town was in an uproar. People who laughed her off at first were now openly angry, and those who had been on the fence quickly jumped off. Social media was flooded with people denouncing her, calling for her to drop out of the race. But, true to form, Karen wasn't about to go down without a fight. She held a press conference to clear the air. I went down there, curious to see how she'd try to spin this. She took to the podium, glared at the reporters, and, with a voice full of indignation, announced that all the allegations against her were lies. "They're afraid of me because I'm not part of their little club," she shouted, pointing at the reporters. "They don't want change. They want to keep this city under their control." I looked around and could see the reporters exchanging glances, some of them barely able to contain their skepticism. As they fired off questions, Karen's responses became more and more erratic. At one point, someone asked about the threats she'd made to business owners, and she scoffed. "They're just bitter because they know I'm the one who will finally clean up this town." She kept going, doubling down on every accusation, refusing to admit she'd done anything wrong. The longer she spoke, the more the crowd grew restless, people shaking their heads and muttering to each other. And then, without warning, she stormed off the stage, muttering that this was all just a witch hunt. Election day came, and it was a landslide against her. I wasn't surprised, but I did wonder if she'd finally let it go. But as I saw her walking out of City Hall that night, she caught my eye, muttering to herself about conspiracies and how she'd be back. She was already talking about her next campaign, as if this one hadn't been a complete disaster. I couldn't help but shake my head. Karen hadn't learned a thing. In her mind, she'd been wronged, and the rest of us were just too blind to see it. The truth didn't matter to her, only her version of it did. And somehow, I knew that wouldn't be the last we'd see of her. If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day. Halloween in our neighborhood was usually a big deal. People would go all out with decorations and the most elaborate costumes. Kids would parade through the streets in everything from classic witches and superheroes to funny or quirky characters. It was always harmless fun, or so we thought. This year, though, things took a wild turn, thanks to Karen. The Halloween festivities had barely started when Karen set her sights on the kids' costumes. Now, most of us had seen her throw a fit about various neighborhood offenses before, but we never anticipated that she'd take issue with Halloween costumes of all things. From princess dresses to superhero masks, every choice seemed to rub her the wrong way. The moment she saw something she didn't like, she marched right up to the parents, practically ready to conduct an interrogation on their front porches. I was outside helping my neighbors with last-minute decorations when I saw her first confrontation. Karen stomped up to Jenny's door, arms crossed, a look of absolute outrage etched on her face. Little Sophie, Jenny's daughter, was dressed as a cute little zombie with some face paint and torn clothes. A far cry from anything offensive. But Karen glared at Jenny like she'd just committed the neighborhood's gravest offense. I can't believe you let your child dress like that, Karen hissed, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air. It's completely inappropriate. Jenny looked taken aback. It's just Halloween, Karen. She's just having fun. Karen's eyes narrowed. Fun? Fun shouldn't involve scaring other children. This costume is traumatizing. Jenny laughed, half in disbelief, half in frustration. It's face paint, Karen. I don't think anyone's going to have nightmares. But Karen wouldn't back down. I'm serious, Jenny. This is exactly what's wrong with Halloween these days. It's turning into some horror show. A few of us gathered nearby were already whispering, exchanging glances. Karen was known for making mountains out of molehills, but this was reaching new levels. She left Jenny's house with an air of self-righteous fury and moved on to the next family like she was on a mission. One by one, she went door to door, practically barging into people's private Halloween fun, criticizing kids' costumes, and trying to lecture parents about her standards. Some parents laughed her off, but others were outright irritated. She even confronted the Johnsons, whose twin boys were dressed as pirates. I couldn't hear the full conversation from where I was standing, but I did catch Karen's shrill voice saying, "Pirates? Really? Teaching your kids to idolize criminals?" By now, word had spread, and people were gathering on their porches, watching as Karen stormed from house to house like some self-appointed Halloween judge. You could see the annoyance building in people's faces. This was supposed to be a fun night, and Karen was turning it into her personal crusade. Then, she did something that no one expected. After getting into a particularly heated exchange with the Martins, she marched to her car, grabbed a megaphone, and started blasting her voice across the street. "Attention, neighbors," she announced, the megaphone crackling as she spoke. "This so-called celebration is getting out of control. I'm starting an online petition to cancel all Halloween activities in this neighborhood until people can learn to make appropriate costume choices." I swear, you could hear the collective groan from everyone within earshot. A couple of kids, who had been nervously watching her from behind their parents, burst into laughter, unable to believe what they were hearing. But Karen was dead serious. She started waving her phone around, shouting, "Anyone who wants to support this petition, come sign up. We need to put an end to this madness." Of course, nobody volunteered. Instead, the laughter only grew louder, and a few parents shook their heads, muttering about Karen needing a hobby. But that only seemed to fuel her outrage. She lifted the megaphone again, her voice getting even louder. "I see what's going on here. You're all ignoring me, but I won't stand for this disrespect." That's when things really escalated. Karen, practically foaming at the mouth, began screaming into the megaphone, her words barely making sense at this point. She was yelling about setting standards and protecting the children, but her tone was so hysterical that it was hard to even follow what she was saying. Kids were covering their ears, parents were rolling their eyes, and a few people even took out their phones, recording the spectacle. I noticed a couple of people quietly dialing their phones. I had a hunch who they were calling. Not long after, the faint sound of sirens started growing louder. It wasn't exactly a surprise when the police car pulled up, lights flashing. Two officers stepped out, looking around at the growing crowd and at Karen, who was still ranting, oblivious to the fact that her audience was fed up and even amused at this point. One of the officers walked up to her, holding up his hand. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to put the megaphone down." Karen turned to the officer, her face a mixture of outrage and indignation. "Officer, these people are out of control. I'm doing what's necessary to restore order here." The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but causing a disturbance with a megaphone is not the way to handle this." Karen looked around at us like we were the ones in the wrong. "You're all going to regret this," she spat. "When your children are scarred by these horrific costumes, don't come crying to me." The officer's patience was visibly wearing thin. "Ma'am, I need you to put the megaphone down now, or we'll have to take further action." For a split second, I thought Karen might actually listen. But then, as if possessed by some Halloween spirit of defiance, she clutched the megaphone tighter and launched into another rant about how the whole neighborhood had lost its moral compass. That was the last straw. The officer stepped forward, gently but firmly, and took the megaphone from her. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." The crowd watched as Karen's face transformed from outrage to something almost resembling panic. "You can't do this. I have rights," she shrieked, her voice echoing down the street even without the megaphone. The officer gave her a calm but firm look. "And you're disturbing the peace. Let's go." As they escorted her to the car, the neighborhood was eerily silent, everyone watching as she continued her dramatic exit, shouting about how we'd all regret this and promising that this wasn't over. She even managed to get in one last threat about her petition, despite no one taking it seriously. When the police car finally pulled away, a collective sigh of relief spread through the crowd. The kids, who had been watching with wide eyes, finally went back to their trick-or-treating, laughing and joking about the Halloween Grinch that tried to ruin their night. Parents exchanged looks, some still chuckling at the absurdity of it all. Later, as we gathered back around, someone joked, "Well, I guess that's our Halloween entertainment for the year." It was hard to disagree. Karen had somehow managed to turn what was supposed to be a night of harmless fun into a showdown of epic proportions. And true to her word, Karen did try to start that petition online, blasting her outrage across social media. But instead of rallying support, all she got were comments poking fun at her meltdown. People shared videos of her yelling into the megaphone, and it spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, everyone knew about the Halloween costume controversy, and Karen's reputation for being that neighbor was firmly cemented. Even now, whenever Halloween rolls around, someone inevitably brings up the infamous night Karen tried to police our kids' costumes. And each year, as the decorations go up and the costumes come out, it's with a little extra humor and perhaps a silent hope that Karen's finally learned to let the rest of us enjoy the holiday in peace.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.